Good afternoon, everybody. You are live on the Social Security Tele-Town Hall with Congresswoman Becca Balint and Congressman John Larson. My name is David Scher. I am Congresswoman Balint's State Director. I'll be jumping in from time to time to help with the moderation, but for the most part, you're going to be talking with the Congresswoman and Congressman. And in just a moment, Congresswoman Balint will introduce herself and say a few words, as will Congressman Larson. Please, if you have a question about Social Security, dial *3 anytime, and we'll have folks ready to answer and get you in the line to ask a question. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Congresswoman Becca Balint.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. It's critical that those of us in Congress are transparent and that we have open conversations about our work and what we're seeing in Washington. And I know from speaking with so many Vermonters, you're concerned about Social Security, and there are good reasons for that. So today, we're going to address your questions and concerns about possible threats to Social Security going forward, and hopefully pull back the curtain on how it's all working right now. So as David said, if you have a question now or throughout the call, please just dial *3 to get your questions in the queue. And you can also dial *6 to get updates from my office and join my newsletter. So again, *3 to ask a question and *6 to get updates from my office. So I know we're here to talk about Social Security, which I'm very excited to do, but I wanted to just take a few moments to talk about this moment that we're facing right now, because I hear from so many of you, you feel it, you understand it, our democracy and our Constitution are under grave threat. And it's important to every American, no matter who you voted for, that we give attention to this. What we are witnessing are the very foundations of fairness and democracy being under attack by this administration. And it's not good for us individually, and it's not good for our nation. And I just want to assure you that Democrats like Representative John Larson and I are taking on these attacks every single day in committee and on the House floor to stand up for what's right and also to defend the democracy and our Constitution. And gatherings like this are so important. It's what binds the community together here in Vermont. It's what gives us the courage and the energy to push back against policies that are harmful to Vermonters and most particularly to seniors. So again, thank you for taking time out of your day to join this call, and I just want to say your engagement really matters. So before I introduce Representative Larson, I just want to remind folks, dial *3 to ask a question. So right now, I'm very excited to talk to you about Connecticut Congressman John Larson. Representative Larson sits on the influential Ways and Means Committee, including the Subcommittee on Trade and the Social Security Subcommittee, where he serves as our most senior Democrat. Throughout his time in Congress, John has proven himself to be a staunch advocate for Connecticut's working families, for manufacturing and for small businesses, and for common sense solutions for the problems that Americans face every day. And when John heard that retirees in his district were living on just $11,000 a year or less, he knew he had to act to keep everyone from retiring into poverty. So he introduced the Social Security 2100 Act to enhance benefits and ensure the foundation of our retirement system remains strong for generations. And John has also introduced proposals to allow the federal government to directly negotiate lower drug prices for over 40 million Medicare beneficiaries. So simply put, my colleague, John Larson, is our biggest Social Security champion and our most knowledgeable colleague on this issue, which is why I invited him to be with me today on this town hall. So I'm thrilled that he's joined us. And John, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Well, thank you, Becca, and it's great to join all the Vermonters on the call. It's been an honor to me, having served in the House with both Bernie and Peter, now to be able to serve with you. And I can't tell Vermonters enough about the credibility, the hard work, and the earnest at which you approach this job. And so I'm delighted to be here as we try to make sure we educate and inform people all across the country. Now, Vermonters are pretty knowledgeable and well-informed, and I know you want to make sure we get to the Q&A as fast as we can, but suffice it to say that there are more than 70 million people that are on Social Security. Furthermore, 10,000 baby boomers a day become eligible for Social Security. But the last time Congress, which is the sole body that can do something to expand and protect it, the last time it acted, Richard Nixon was President of the United States. When Becca first came here, she noted that to me and asked what we were doing about it. I engaged her with the bill and everything that was in it, and most notably, and I guess predictably, being a Vermonter, she said, well, I just want to make sure that this is going to expand benefits for those who need it, that we're going to be able to lift the people who are currently receiving below poverty level checks from the government. Imagine that, the wealthiest government in the world, and more than 5 million fellow Americans are getting below poverty level checks from the nation's number one insurance program, the number one anti-poverty program for the elderly, and until the child tax credit becomes permanent, the number one anti-poverty program for children, as well as being the program that more veterans rely on for disability than they do the VA. We also wanted to make sure that we're improving the disability, and as most of you, I'm sure, are aware, Social Security is just not a pension. It's spousal, it's widows, it's dependent children, and also disability that it provides. And the genius of Roosevelt is still with us in terms of how practical this is in being what I like to call capitalism's safety net that allows people to be entrepreneurial in a market economy and take risk and yet have protection there. And yet, as Becca and I both know, it's long overdue not just to be protected. You'll hear people talk about that often, but there hasn't been an enhancement since 1971. And so we're out to improve that, including making sure that people who have to continue to work on Social Security don't pay taxes. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions and concerns, and I'm honored to be here with somebody who does just such an outstanding job in Congress as Becca, and I'm so thrilled to work with her on a daily basis, and together we're going to get this done. Now, first, it's going to be a lot of resistance to what the Republicans want to do and what the current sitting president wants to do. And we're prepared to answer any questions on those as well. But most disturbingly, and Becca and I chatted about this recently, is what the Supreme Court ruled by overturning 2 lower court decisions to stop DOGE employees from going into Social Security and looking at personal records of all of us. They have no business there. There's no reason for them to do that. There's no justification for that. And we've introduced separate legislation, of which, of course, Becca is an original co-sponsor. And quite simply, what it does is it prevents DOGE from going into Social Security or any other department for that matter and gaining people's personal information. They're going to say that they're there because they're trying to weed out all the fraud and abuse. But let me tell you something. Social Security is still the nation's number one program for efficiency. And I come from an insurance capital of the world in Hartford, Connecticut. Administrative costs in the private sector anywhere from 16 to 26%. In its heyday, Social Security was administered at 1.5%. It's now, with cuts Republicans have made, under 1%. And I think all of you would probably agree what we want and expect most is that when we put a call, especially with the number of baby boomers who are becoming eligible, We want to be able to talk to a human being at the other end of the line and make sure that our regional offices stay open, that the phone service is there, and that we can get our questions answered by someone who understands and can help and assist us. And that's why we're so focused on making sure we get our legislation passed that will enhance and help everyone. And with that, Becca, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks so much, John. And you were very timely with your laying out the concerns about DOGE. The first caller it has a question about that. Before I turn over to him, I just want to mention to folks, remember, hit *3 if you have a question, and *6 if you'd like to get more information from my office. And so at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Zachary, who did not give a town, but my understanding is Zachary is on the line and has a question about DOGE.
Yeah, hi, Becca and John. Zach Pratt, and I'm from Rutland. And thank you, John, for what you just said about DOGE. And I have many questions. I'm a Vietnam era vet as well. But my main question is, all of my information is linked to Social Security number, my medical information, my credit card information, probably more information than should have ever been let out there in the first place. And I've had fraud pulled on me where my bank account has been emptied by fraudsters, which I recovered, but it was a process. So how is the government going to protect me if these DOGE people get those numbers and can use them to look up all sorts of stuff for me? I mean, how would I ever prove that it was somebody from DOGE or just some regular hacker that's taking my information and using it? And that's my question.
Well,
Thank you so much, Zach. Yeah, take it away,
Zach,
John.
Zach, that's exactly the point. I mean, first and foremost, they have no right to. So the questions you have to ask is, so why do they want this information? Let's start there. And they want it, and Elon Musk, in one of the moments where he was honest, said, well, listen, when you look at the federal budget, 70% of the federal budget is comprised of three agencies, and they are the defense budget, Medicare and Medicaid, and Social Security. But of the three, Zach, only one of them has a trust fund, and that's Social Security. Now, you may recall that Trump said that he wanted Elon to find $2 trillion in cuts. It's no coincidence, by the way, that the Social Security Trust Fund just happens to have $2.7 trillion of your money. Another point that I want to make and underscore, because sometimes you'll hear people, and especially our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, who call this an entitlement program. It is not an entitlement program. This is a program that you have paid for. You do so, and it's easily verifiable just by looking at your check stub that says FICA. That stands for Federal Insurance Contribution. Whose? Yours. And everyone says, well, I know, but the business community pays half. They, in fact, do pay half, but it's fully tax deductible. And so being tax deductible, who pays that other half? Well, that's the government. And who's the government? We, the people. And so you're paying fully for that Social Security benefit, and it is in a trust fund that they cannot get at. And so both that trust fund and that data and information, especially, and we could spend a whole day just talking about artificial intelligence, especially as something that can be used in a very positive manner for the good of everyone, but something in the wrong hands could be very dangerous. And you rattled through very eloquently all the various things that you know that you've been susceptible to already. So that should cast doubt and aspersions on anyone. I don't care who it is, DOGE or anyone else, having access to those documents that have always been protected. But my feeling is that they're after these documents so that they can both make the case, as they're attempting to do currently, by dismantling the existing Social Security agency from within under the auspices that they're trying to make it more efficient and better. There's more than a thread of truth that the old system called COBOL needed to be enhanced and improved. But that has nothing to do with looking at your personal documents. We could all make sure, and here's where AI could play a great role, that we streamline and make things more efficient and less costly so that we can continue to put more money into the trust fund. But clearly, this does not require them having access to your personal data unless they have other purposes at mind. Now, the commissioner has been called before the committee, and we're going to grill them on this. When I spoke to him in person, he said that no, he wasn't going to let the DOGE people come in and look at these records. I said, well, that's our primary concern, and this was underscored by another New Englander, Rich Neal, who chairs, he will chair, but currently he's the ranking Democrat on Ways and Means, and also emphasized our concern about this as well. So that's what we're facing, and we're putting forward legislation to stop him. Now, as you know, we're in the minority, and it's going to require our Republican colleagues to join us in this, but nonetheless, they're going to have a lot of explaining to do with a number of their constituents. Having access to people's information isn't Democrat or Republican. All Americans are concerned about this, and they ought to be made aware of it. And that's what Becca and I and Rich are all going to do. In fact, all of New England is joined in this effort to make sure that they don't have access to this information and it's continued to be protected.
Thank you so much, John. You speak my mind on this. It's something that I hear from Vermonters every time I'm at an event or a town hall. People are very concerned about their private information. And as you told me last week, you're gonna grill these folks and find out what it is that they are doing with our private information and why they need access to it. So very much appreciate not just your ability to be such a great watchdog, but to always be thinking ahead, too, because I know you've been asking about this for months. Next up, I have Lori from Colchester calling in. Lori?
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, John. Hi, Rebecca and John. It's Lori. Thank you for taking my question. I am a retired teacher from Vermont, and first of all, I've learned a lot just being on the call, but I'm very, very concerned about all the things that are happening around the cuts and the DOGE issue. What I worry about is that many seniors don't seem to be able to quantify what those cuts are going to look like for them in terms of their month-to-month budgets. And I'm wondering in what ways can we increase communication and platforms to start helping people really actualize and understand that if it got cut this much, this means this many dollars in a month that you're going to lose in your check, or et cetera, because I think that's what's happening with Medicaid. Is my understanding is 47% of the people that voted that were on Medicaid voted for Trump. I don't think they realized what the cuts would be. So how can we increase our platforms to seniors so that they can start to advocate for themselves? And what are we doing across platforms? What platforms are we using to get the word out in addition to things like these?
Really appreciate that question. And Lori, I'm curious if also part of your concern too is we have heard for years about the threats to privatization of Social Security, and how do we get the word out there that, we won't be better off for that? John?
Yeah, well, Lori, first of all, an excellent question. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the hammer when it comes to both platforms, but also how do we get the information out? And usually at most town halls that I have, and when I get to talk to people, people will say to me in frustration, well, what can we do? Well, you're our representative and we know you support this, but how can we do this? How can we be more effective? And I said, well, you got to reach out to everybody, and we've got to be on as many platforms. You're a former teacher, and the fact that WEP and GPO has been approved was a great thing, and people will be getting money who have paid into Social Security that they were previously denied. But what a lot of people don't know is that it wasn't paid for, and because it wasn't paid for, when the trustees report comes out tomorrow, everyone's going to see, well, look, Social Security's moved up by a full 1.5 to 2 years in terms of the fund being depleted. Our proposal that Becca and I have put in is, has always paid for WEP and GPO and will continue to do so that we not only keep the fund solvent, but we also are able to expand benefits that haven't been expanded in over 54 years. So getting that message out on as many platforms, and also getting that legislation out and having groups, and whether it be the NEA or whether it be the AFL-CIO or whether it be Social Security Works or the Committee to Preserve and Protect Social Security, those are platforms that are all out there and working. I had a meeting with the more than 350 organizations, and they're waiting for us to drop yet another bill. They're aware of both of these to both, A, protect, and number one, DOGE from going after this information, but number two, also talk about in a very clear way the importance of making sure that we just don't protect Social Security, but we expand it. Again, and I hate to be repetitive, but it hasn't been expanded in 54 years. Yeah, I think it needs a little assistance.
Yeah, that's John. Such a great point. It's something that I've been talking about a lot with my constituents here in Vermont, is that we have to be proactive in changing the framing on these issues, that it isn't enough just to protect Social Security. We have to expand it and make it workable for seniors now who desperately need resources so they're not living at the poverty level. And so I'm so glad that you brought that up. Again, to folks who are just joining, you can send us a question by hitting *3. Next up is Mary Jane from Huntington. Mary Jane, you on the line?
Yes, I can. You hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for taking my question, John and Rebecca. I was born and raised in Connecticut and moved to Vermont in 2010, hoping for this to be my forever home. I am planning out my retirement, and I am finding that it's almost going to be impossible to live off the Social Security benefits that I planned on using, outside of my small 401k. And what I'm finding is that I may have to move out of state to look to another state that doesn't tax Social Security the way that this state or Connecticut does. Why is it that we don't have some sort of a standard tax or no tax on Social Security benefits that we have already paid into over the course of our life?
Really appreciate the question, Mary Jane. What's the history of that, John?
Well, I think, quite frankly, some individual states have done it because in the absence of federal law, but you raise a number of important points, and I don't think enough people truly understand this. First and foremost, for 40% of all Americans. So that's 40% of the 73 million people that are on Social Security. This is the only benefit that they have. Now, you're talking about Social Security and your other pension, and you're finding it very difficult to live with that because, A, the taxation, which you may have heard me say earlier to the last caller, under our proposal, we eliminate the tax on Social Security. Why? Because it's double taxation, and that shouldn't be. And you pointed that out. You didn't say that exactly, but you were pointing that out in your remarks, and you're absolutely correct. That shouldn't be the case. That's double taxation. And what's even more astoundingly, for some people who don't pay any Social Security, and I should have mentioned this at the outset because everyone says, well, you keep saying, how are you going to, you're paying for this. Well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, we're going to pay for it by lifting the cap on people making over $400,000. And every town hall I go to, I ask everyone, raise your hand if you're making over $400,000. I've yet to have anyone raise their hand. But just by doing that, by people, and it's never going to say, well, that's additional taxation. No, it's not taxation, number one. Number two, it's it's capitalism's number one safety net program. The genius of Roosevelt was that we needed to have a system that would be there for people so that in the event there was a layoff, in the event a business foreclosed, in the event a catastrophe occurs, that there's a safety net there for you. Hasn't been adjusted in more than 54 years. All the more reason why we have to take the steps to make sure that we adjust that across the board for everyone, eliminating the taxation, lifting people who are getting below poverty level checks above that, because the new floor will be 125% of what the poverty level is, making sure that the disability payments are intact as well. These are all critical things to Social Security, and doing all of those will allow people who this is their only benefit, but also people like yourself, this will increase the amount of money that you're going to be receiving from Social Security overall. A 2% across the board increase. Look, nobody's going to get wealthy on Social Security. Let's be clear about that. But this, at its heart, it was basically there to make sure that you could sustain yourself on it. I don't know how the 40% of American people, and you're having problems by moving from Connecticut to Vermont, but I don't know how these 40+% of American people, over 28 million people, get along on only Social Security.
Yeah. John, you make such a good point. And just to remind folks who may be joining the call late, one of the things that Congressman Larson and I mentioned early on is that we are both, John's bill, the Social Security 2100 Act, is a bill that I'm a co-sponsor on, and it does increase benefits 2% across the board. It also improves the cost of living adjustment, the COLA, to reflect inflation, and as many aspects of the bill that are to modernize a program that so many Americans rely on, as John just said, that it's their only source of income in retirement. So thank you so much for that, John. Next caller is Ira from Ferrisburg. Ira, you on the call?
Yep, I'm here.
Great. Take it away.
Wonderful. Yeah, so my question, I'm 24. This is going to be a little bit offbeat from what's been discussed, and I've been learning a few things here or there since being on this call for the past 20 minutes. But as far as my concern, I'm a business owner, and, with everything considered, like seeing this as an investment, looking at the statistics, it's only 100% of these benefits are only going to extend until 2035. And like what you mentioned, John, how that year, it keeps rolling back. So as a young person, truthfully, like what you mentioned with the cap at $400,000, being taken out for Social Security and whatever else, what other protections are there for a young person like me to keep voting the way that I'm voting? To make sure that something like that's established, not only just for me, but other people my generation.
Well, I think.
So, yeah, John, go ahead.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think all of our concerns are about educating people about the benefits of Social Security. Probably the most important thing is that, and I'm not including you in this because you sound very well informed, is that a lot of people don't understand that Social Security is not simply a pension, simply a pension benefit, but that's how it's most known for, and that's what it's referred to. But as you heard me say, it also is spousal, widows, dependent children, and disability, because all of those things can happen throughout your life. Now, those are all good things that you should insure against. And could you get an insurance policy for those things? Yes, you could. You could get it individually. You could probably get a disability policy that might cover you. You could probably get insurance on your spouse. You could get insurance certainly on children, etc. But it wouldn't be in one package and wouldn't cover your pension as well. And for a lot of people, and especially those, as you heard me say, that this is the only thing they have, fortunately, this is available to them because for most of them, they wouldn't be able to buy any one of those benefits in the private market. So that's the uniqueness of Social Security, but again, it was designed to be the floor, and to have a solid floor and foundation is vitally important and allows you to build on that, and it allows you to make other investments and other pensions, et cetera. And as a young 24-year-old businessman, I'm sure that you have. But in order to keep this system of free enterprise alive, we need something like this. Why? Well, here's the thing that doesn't often get discussed about Social Security. All 435 congressional districts, every individual, all the 73 million plus people that are on Social Security, all receive monthly payments. On average, that's 143,000 people per congressional district. And on average, every district receives in excess of $200 million monthly. What does that mean? Well, what that means is they take that money in their district. And again, remembering what I said before, that for some of them, this is the only thing they have. Where do they spend that money? They spend it right back in the districts they live in. And they spend it on groceries. They spend it at the pharmacy, on rent, on mortgage, on putting gas in their car, on supporting small businesses within the districts that they live in. And so it is, in essence, an essential economic development plan. And especially in this post-COVID era and we're not quite through this post-inflationary period yet, but the United States is doing better than most nations. Well, this is money that's necessary to come in and goes directly to the people who need it the most and who will directly spend it right back in the districts that they live. So,
John, if I could jump in for a sec, I just
sure,
also
please.
want to sort of dig a little bit under what I think Ira was also getting at, which is, do you have confidence that Social Security will be solvent when he is hitting retirement?
Absolutely, provided that Congress acts. And that's the thing. This is where people should be outraged and make sure that Congress acts. I like to tell the story about George Washington, if you'll forgive me, but in 1775, Washington stationed with the Continental Army outside of Boston. They didn't think, Washington was very doubtful that the then Continental Congress would vote for independence. And in fact, Tories were actually carrying the day at the time until this one man named Thomas Paine wrote a book called Common Sense. Really wasn't even a book. A pamphlet about 46 pages long. It was the most well-read document in all 13 colonies other than the Bible. Washington later, when he became president, credited Thomas Paine and Common Sense with making the difference in terms of independence. Why? Because more people read it and they wrote, talked to, and spoke to their member of Congress and said, you need to change this. So the change didn't happen with a sitting body of Congress that oftentimes can be contentious and goes back and forth arguing, unless the people who say, hey, wait a minute, this is going to impact me now and in the future, and you guys need to take action. And that's what will create the kind of change that I think everyone desires, driven by the people as much as it is by, Rebecca and myself and all the over 200 sponsors of our bill that we have.
Well, I think that's a really great point, and I think it's going to be a great segue into our next question. But just to mention, once again, if you have a question, please hit *3. You can get in the question queue, and you can hit *6 if you're interested in getting more information from my office. So next up is Bruce from South Londonderry. Bruce, you on the call?
Hi. Thanks, Rebecca and John. I'm 71, and I definitely count on Social Security. And I attended the march on the 14th in Chester, where there was almost 600 people. It was great, and some good speeches. And I'm just wondering if actions like that could have, if you feel like actions like that have any effect on this administration to maybe have them modify their views about cutting Social Security.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Bruce. I have no doubt that when we have our voices heard and when they see how unpopular something is, and we've seen this from this administration, it was outrage when the administration said they wouldn't be taking any more calls at offices for Social Security, that you needed to show up in person. And there was a national outrage about it, people speaking up and pushing back, and they reversed course. So absolutely it makes a difference. John, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And Becca, I can't underscore that enough, that these rallies and people turning out because, and it's already having an impact on this administration. Now, I say that advisedly. They're maneuvering because they see the impact this is having and what's on the people's minds. And so they're going to try to, my guess is, to come up with some kind of alternative plan. And, as we started out in the beginning, and, how is this message get out there on what platforms, as we were talking earlier today with a number of the groups that are supportive of this, they're equally concerned that this administration is very good at confusing and telling people that they're taking care of something when, in fact, that may not be the case at all. So we have to be vigilant, and that's why, again, common sense will prevail here, and people who are like yourself, Bruce, who are receiving Social Security and understands its importance and significance, and know that when it's enhanced to further help you, that's only going to be helpful to every single one of our congressional districts. The concern here is that they attempt still is there on them to privatize this by making it appear that Social Security isn't effective, that it's, as they're saying in some of the reports, well, it's corrupt. We said, well, why isn't Elon Musk in front of us talking about where he found all that corruption?
That's
and
right.
I said, why isn't he appearing before congressional committees? Why aren't you having these hearings? How is it that you can possibly allow DOGE into these, have access to these materials, and they can't even come before Congress? We're a co-equal branch of government, and the public demands these answers. We want them to come before us. They continue to resist that, and they're going to say, oh, no, that's because we got to find all this fraud, abuse, and waste, and then we're going to give you a much better product than Social Security. We love Social Security, as Trump says. We're not going to touch it. We're only here to protect it and expand it, a.k.a. privatize it.
That's right. That's right. And we've seen this for Republicans for several decades now. And so I think bottom line, Bruce, is I know I speak for all the members of Congress who care deeply about Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, that yes, protesting matters, telling your stories matter, and it helps to shape public opinion. I'm going to turn now to Tim. I'm not sure what town you're calling from, Tim, but you're on the line.
From South Burlington. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay, great.
Congratulations on this wonderful communication program. I've spent 43 years administering retirement plans throughout my career, and I've never understood why the wage base cuts off at whatever it cuts off at these days, 170,000 or whatever. You could certainly have that increased. I mean, corporations get a deduction for salaries paid up to $1 million. Why have a cap at all? Why isn't it? I mean, if I'm going to pay my 6% on my paycheck, why isn't somebody who's taking $1 million going to pay 6% on their paycheck? That's my first question.
John,
my second question is.
Sorry, go ahead. Why don't you give us the second question?
Because they're kind of wrapped up together. The funding for the program is by statute required to be in the bonds of the U.S. government, which is our debt. So we are paying our tax on the money. It goes into the plan. It then buys government debt, and the government can screw around with that money while it's, under the auspices of their debt. Why can't the trust fund be jiggered so that it is in other debt than the government or other investments than the government, so Congress doesn't get a chance to balance the budget, robbing the money out of the Social Security Trust Fund? I mean, they can buy and sell bonds till their heart's content, and that impacts the value of the fund in the sense of its growth. So I think there needs to be some attention paid to the underlying aspects of the funding, both at the wage-based level and the investment level.
Great. Thank you, Tim, so much for the call. John, what's the history there? Why do we have a cap?
Well, initially, I think, back in 1935, it was primarily so that they could get the bill passed. Now, I dare say back in 1935 and preceding the great crash of 1929, income levels were different, and as you know, it takes Congress as a body to approve it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was adopted bipartisanly. But to his first question and to the point, there's no reason why there should be a cap, and everybody should be paying the same amount. Now, each year that cap continues to grow. When I first introduced this legislation back in 2012, the cap was 125,000. It's now at 173. It'll keep growing. But the pay for under our bill is to lift the cap on people making over 400,000. to the caller's point, who is well versed and understands this, there's no need to, not, just eliminate the cap altogether, except and the politics of it. And the politics were that it was used as you're raising our taxes unnecessarily on people who are already paying in. And it was harder to overcome the argument than it was to why President Biden settled in on saying, well, we'll not tax anyone below $400,000. The truth of the matter is it's really not a tax. It's a insurance policy. It's an insurance premium that people are paying. And again, to the caller's point, it should also be one that everybody pays into, because it's the same thing as paying into part of our national defense program. This is the safety net for the free market enterprise capitalistic system that we're very much involved in, and it makes all the sense in the world to do this, and therefore everybody should pay their fair share.
I agree. So what we're going to do, we got a bunch of people on the line here. We're going to try to get through the next.
And I think questions. He had a second. I think he had a second.
That's right. Thank you, John. Yes. Will you touch on that?
Yeah. Again, I don't know if he's still on the line, but I think what he was saying there is, so why shouldn't Social Security be able to invest in something other than T-bills in order to make it grow, et cetera? There's been a lot of discussion about that. Couple of points. First, that money is in the trust fund. And so, but people will say, as the gentleman pointed out, yeah, but that's a trust fund that's part of the entire federal government. And so what could keep that from, if a Congress decided to, it could, in fact, go into that trust fund. It never has, although people will constantly say, well, they're stealing from our Social Security, or they're taking from our Social Security. In a generalized sense, meaning that it's part of the entire federal budget, you could make that analogy. But the truth is that trust fund remains intact, and that's why what's worrisome is how Elon Musk, who's no dummy, it's no secret why they were looking at Social Security, and the $2,700,000,000,000 of your money, your being the people of the country's money, that relies in that account. I think that there is a way without privatizing, and there's a lot of general discussion, and frankly, the more help we get from people who have been administrator of funds and pension funds, like the gentleman who was on there, that say, yeah, if you looked at this, provided the public felt secure that we were not, this wasn't a Wall Street privatized investment, that you could show and demonstrate on paper how that's going to give you more money. But in fact, when you come down to saying, well, is it a guarantee? And are you going to be able to do more than just pensions? Are you going to be able to do disability, spousal, dependent coverage as well? And then their argument starts to fall apart there. So those were two excellent questions, and that's where the serious discussion has to continue to take place on Social Security. But I believe, and especially as we move forward, there will be more than one significant way, especially with the use of stuff like artificial intelligence and other means, for us to have government make the investment and strengthen the full faith and credit of the United States, which is our trust fund.
Jim, thanks so much for the call. I just want to remind folks, if you are not signed up for my newsletter, we send out regular updates about what I'm doing and what's happening on Capitol Hill. Please press *6, and we'll make sure we get you added to the list. That's *6 to receive newsletters from my office. Next up is Pamela, who I believe has a question about veterans benefits. Pamela, are you on the line?
I don't know if this is the same Pamela that you wanted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we've only got one. We got one in the queue. So.
Oh, okay. It was in
It's all
veterans
you.
benefits. It was actually death benefits, spousal death benefits was my question.
Okay.
That's why I was confused. Sorry about that. Thank you for taking my
that's fine.
call. I am really confused about spousal death benefits and wondering if anything is going to change with that, because my experience has been that it's not really, you mentioned this before, John, that, this is for your spouse, this is for your kid. It's for your kid. If you die before you hit retirement age, your child and your spouse may, and I'm going to say may, get those benefits. My child is currently getting benefits from my husband who passed away, but I have been informed that even though I'm 60, I am not eligible to get my husband's benefits unless I make below a poverty level of like $23,000 a year, which is just insane to me. And I'm wondering if there's any talk about expanding benefits. Is there any talk about expanding death benefits? Because it just seems crazy to me that my husband worked his whole life, he put into the system, and I can, when I reach full retirement age, I can apply for his benefits, but if they're going to be less than my benefits, then it doesn't make any sense. I can't get both. And I don't understand that. It just seems like they've completely robbed my husband of everything that he put in his entire life. And I don't understand that. My child is currently getting benefits, but those end when she turns 18. But she's still going to need my support after that if she goes to college. And it to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I want to stay in my home. I'm lucky because I do have, retirement resources, more than most people that just depend on Social Security. But I was counting on being able to live with my husband for a good, 20 years more. But I can't do that, and he's gone, but yet the government is keeping the money that he put in. It just seems like robbery to me, and I don't know if there's any talk about changing that. It seems archaic because, we used to just, especially for women, we are now two-income households most of the time.
Right.
And, one of us dies, and then, you only get one of those benefits. You don't get both. And it just seems really archaic to me and really, really, really shady, and that they just, they're taking your benefits. He put into the system his entire life, and it's just not fair.
Yeah. Pamela, thank you so much for the call. And John, can you speak to spousal benefits, death benefits?
Well, yeah, and I think she raises a couple of good points. I think, unfortunately, in Congress, the history has been of this, and it's completely unfair, as she has pointed out, that people would say, well, they're double dipping. And it's not double dipping whatsoever. She points out, her husband is paid into the system. What's a little bit confusing to me is that, under our bill, again, benefits for children would remain until they're instead of 18 to 26, because so many, we teach and tell our children and raise them and say, you all ought to go to college or go on to another, skill set or an opportunity to enhance your life and your income. But as she points out, they're still her dependents during that time. So we want to go back to having children be able to be on the policy until their age 26. The spousal issue, again, because they're both contributing to Social Security, but my guess is going to be, right, wrong, or indifferent, but this is true of Social Security, that for the most part, men receive more in terms of Social Security benefits. Why? Well, one, because women were at home, and in her case, I'm sure because of raising children, et cetera, and even when they were in the workforce, until pay equity was achieved, they were making less than their male counterparts. So therefore, it becomes more optimal for them to receive the male benefits. But the guidelines, as she pointed out, by Social Security, and they need to be reviewed as well and changed so that you want the people, the way that she phrased it was, well, he paid into the system, but I'm not able to receive that money that he gets until I reach a certain age. Well, all of these things have to be examined on a case-by-case basis, et cetera, and so I couldn't really answer accurately, but I would suggest, and she should, and maybe with your help, sit down with the Social Security people in the office and go through this to make sure that every single opportunity for her to take care of both herself and her children can change. But some of it will take legislative change that you and I are sponsoring that will improve and enhance Social Security. But you can't help but feel sorry for her, and we try to help.
And so this is a great segue to just letting folks know who are on the call. If you do have questions about Social Security, your benefits, or you need assistance, do not hesitate to call my office. It's 802-652-2450. Once again, 802-652-2450. That's my number in Vermont. You can find that on the web. You can certainly Google at Representative Becca Balint, and you'll find our office numbers there. Once again, please hit *6 if you want to receive newsletters from the office. And we're going to go now to Xenia. And I'm not sure what town you're in. Xenia, you still on the line? Okay, so now we're going to Barbara from Jeffersonville.
Hello.
Is this Barbara?
Yes, it is.
Great. What's your question?
So first, thank you for holding this town hall meeting and all of your hard work. I'm moving towards 80 years old, and I live solely on Social Security and rely on Medicare to cover the lion's share of my medical costs. And many callers and yourself today have addressed, these concerns, such as individuals like myself who rely on Social Security funds. But I also have further concern as to how the Trump administration funding to the states in general that allows states like ours to have programs like renters rebates and the homeowners tax assistance and winter fuel assistance and transportation and meals programs. Are the states in jeopardy of losing a lot of funds to put a strain on these kind of programs that are offered to Vermonters through the state of Vermont and individuals in other states and programs they happen to have? That's my first question. And the second question is just a concern that I've been to, one of the rallies, but it's very difficult for people our age to, get out there. And there's a lot of younger people who can't afford to, get to a rally or can't get off work or that sort of thing. And I was wondering if you would be willing to discuss coming up with a program for people to mail in or phone in their support to some of these issues that come up, or if there's a particular Republican senator that we need to wake up and understand how many in the United States are upset with X, Y, or Z that the Trump administration is doing. And I just feel like there's just a vast number of people that are not being heard, even though the rallies such as this past weekend were over 5 million. There's many more, voters than 5 million out there. And I'd love to discuss it with anyone who's willing to explore that idea. So there you go.
Very much appreciate the call, Barbara. And if you are someone that receives newsletters over email, you can hit *6, and we will be sending out updates from the office. And there are also updates on my website and Congressman Larson's website. And I'll be talking with my team about how we can be using some other means to get people involved who can't come to protest. I think that's an excellent point. Just briefly, John, to touch on her first question, should she be worried about getting a Social Security check under Trump?
No, I don't think she should be worried. And oftentimes, but I think everybody should be concerned about changes that they're trying to make and what they're trying to do. And part of what they like to say is that, well, Social Security is broken, it's ineffective, it doesn't work. First thing I do at every forum is I say, you know what? You don't have to go back to the great crash of 1929. All you have to do is go back to 2008 and 2009 during the great recessionary period that we went through, when people saw their 401k become a 101k. During that same time, Social Security never missed a payment. Not a pension benefit, not a spousal, not a widow, not a disability, not a child support payment has ever been missed. Why? It's the full faith and credit of the United States government. And as long as Congress does its job, even in 2034, and as the report will indicate, because with the passage of repeal of weapon GPO, the trust fund will take a hit because more money is going to come out. And the only reason it's taken a hit is because Congress hasn't adjusted it, and people aren't paying their fair share. So, but still, even with that, the Social Security fund will remain intact, except it will be reduced, in this case, by 20%, and especially if Congress does nothing. So the longer Congress doesn't take action, and the longer this persists, the greater it becomes. The trust fund will still be there, except Social Security will be diminutive. And that's what the Trump people are going to try to say, too. They're going to say, look, this fund is antiquated. It's not working the way it should. We've got a better way to show you. And this is what people should fear, because for a lot of people, and going back to the 24-year-old who called before, are going to say, yeah, we could produce far more money in a different way. Well, there are ways to produce more money without privatizing it. But that's not what the Trump people are after. They're after privatizing this system. And that will only mean putting more money in the pockets of very wealthy people already, instead of making sure that the trust fund itself grows, remains solvent, and can expand benefits where they're needed, which again only helps out all 435 congressional districts that make up this great country of ours.
John, I can't thank you enough for joining us. We are coming up on time in just a couple minutes. I did want to just address, I have someone who had been waiting in the queue who had a question about DOGE. We did talk about it earlier, and one of the things I want to say is folks should follow the work of John Larson, and his address for his website is Larson, larson.house.gov. He is someone who is holding people accountable within the government, within DOGE, as it relates to Social Security and other programs. So definitely follow what he is doing. If you have a question, we're not going to get to all of the questions, unfortunately. It's been a tremendous hour that we've had together. If you have questions, you can go to my website, balint.house.gov, and send us an email. That's balint.house.gov, or you can call the office during business hours and talk to somebody on my staff who will help you. It's 802-652-2450. Once again, 802-652-2450. John Larson, thank you so much. One of the things that's so important to me is to bring people to Vermonters that they may never have heard about, but who are fighting so hard on their behalf. And you are such a champion on this issue, and I just can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day to answer Vermonters' questions.
Well, happy to be with you, Rebecca. And, I think Vermont is very fortunate to have somebody with your talent and skill and intellect representing them. And together, you and I are going to work to make sure that we bring about the kind of common sense changes that all your callers have underscored. I especially like the woman at the end who said, well, who do I have to call? Which one of those Republicans do I have to call
That's
to
right.
shake up? Because we know, of course, that Peter and Bernie are solid, and as are, our senators. All of New England is solidly behind Social Security enhancement. But we do have to reach those that continue to hold out, et cetera. And by getting this message out, and it's why those rallies matter, it's why people being able, and I thought it was a great question, too, in a way that I forget exactly the person who said, yeah, you ought to come up with a way to make it easier for us to access or call other people. And we certainly are going to try to do that as well. But it's, as always, a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, John. And once again, if after we get off this call you have more questions, you can call my office at 802-652-2450. My web address is balint.house.gov, and John Larson's is larson.house.gov, and he posts things on there as well. It is the honor of my life to represent all of you in Vermont, and we're going to continue doing these from time to time. And thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.